Welcome to our midweek connection. I had the opportunity to sit down with Edward Krahn and Mark Alward just recently, and we talked about the history of the church, and it kind of went on for a few hours. So I've cut this up into segments, and so right now I hope you will enjoy what I am calling part one of the history of our church. So sit back, grab a coffee, enjoy, and maybe for those who have been in our church for a while, some of those memories will start to come back. And for others who have just recently joined us, I hope you will experience a little bit of history with us. Well, here we are, and this is our midweek connection. And I've probably brought together three of the most controversial individuals in our church to tell the history of the church. If I was actually to tell the history of the church, probably should have called Alan Douglas.
Yeah.
But he's been here the longest from the very beginning and would know it all. I had the privilege of meeting John Shepherd not too long ago at the 50th anniversary. A year after that, he went to go be with the Lord. But he's in better places, and I've also had the privilege of knowing David Shepherd, who is instrumental in from Bothwell to kind of lead the charge in building this church. And as I was bringing these guys together, I don't know if you guys know much about the time between John Shepherd and Ron Garrison.
My family started attending when Cal King was the pastor.
Okay.
So he was prior to Ron Garrison.
Yep.
And
there was a few ministers during that time period.
There was a few right
the
there.
70s, where I don't know if it was the Dark Ages or.
Well, it was it was an interesting time, but Cal King was I think the first pastor that was here, and then there was Bennett for a short period of time. But I think in my time in the church, the most significant period was with Ron Garrison. I think I started attending when I was about 10, and so he came when I was a little older, a couple years later, I guess. And then, of course, after high school, I left Canada and have been back to visit. But that's kind of that period, growing up from a small teenager to the end of high school is my period of time at church.
Yeah, so what we're going to try and do is tell our interpretation of history.
Yeah.
This could be dangerous. Looking at Mark and all your fabulous puns, and I can just imagine right now people watching this video going, oh no.
Yeah, possibly.
One of the kids from the youth group, isn't that wild?
I definitely came from a different background. I grew up in the church. I didn't grow up in the church. I
didn't grow up in the church either.
Right. I came as a foul-mouthed kid that Pastor Garrison did very well with, to tolerate and to nurture and bring along.
And my parents took it upon themselves before the days, and again, you have to understand church history as well. Reverend Garrison was big in, he knew through his personal life background that he didn't understand things. And so he did a lot of reading. For a guy who you might deem not to be a studious person, there's a guy who read every book out there. And he was bound and bent that he was going to succeed for his community. And what he realized as well was a lot of these books on how we built this wonderful church, the things didn't really apply because, first of all, they were from big cities. And again, each community is unique, but he really focused on trying to find a way. And one of the things back then was bus ministries. You could just find buses and bring in kids for miles around. But
now you get arrested for that.
Well, yeah, but from my perspective, we had these large vehicles, and my folks would be it for youth group or Sundays, Sunday school or other things, they would pick people up. And I remember, one example, we got a phone call from Royal View Church that there's a family that we sort of kind of know that moved out into the country. I think the kids would come to Sunday school if you'd pick them up, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it was the Hindleys.
Right.
And so, a wonderful relationship began with my father and Keith, the father. He wanted to kind of be this farmer. He worked at the Ford plant and thought he'd start this little farm thing out in the middle of nowhere. And it's just about a mile off of County Road 14. And it's interesting because back then you could get trees and plant it for a penny a piece. And so now, 40 years later, you drive by the property and say, wow, those, But again, my folks would drive out and, out to Newberry Newberry and Bothwell. They would drive out and pick up Mark and Jan and Rob. And Rob was kind of on his own because his folks were church-ish, and he was always one of the first people to get a vehicle. So, but that period before Rob had a car, my folks picked up everybody, and it was, sometimes it was an hour and a half of driving to bringing these kids for Sunday school, and they did it. They had, big cars, and we kind of do what needed to be done.
Those cars were used for youth group as well.
Yeah.
Youth events. I think we packed 17 into that car once.
Thank you. I knew nobody would believe me if I spoke.
Done.
That's right. You
17
said it.
people
Yeah.
went up to a youth conference in London with
Yeah.
Yep.
And a 5-seater?
No, this was a 78 New Yorker.
Oh, yeah.
Hooked them up.
Yeah.
It was a comfortable ride, even when you laid them across each other. It was crazy.
Literally what we did.
Yeah, we did.
Each other.
And I remember, I hate to kind of veer off a bit, but sometimes over my lifetime, I've learned that certain songs have meaning because they have history in your life. And I remember standing in line at roller skating, right? There used to be Christian roller skating there at the Roller Palace. There was 2 places in London.
So I think I remember that at the end of its era. But
Yeah, Roller Palace, we would take, and I'm standing in line waiting to go in, and I hear this song coming over the speakers. Now, it wasn't a Christian song, and it upset me because I thought, I'll never be able to play that song. And it's such a great song. And I remember the history in my life over the last couple of years, where and when I've been able to play that song. And as recently as the second last week before the shutdown, being able to, with my collection of musical friends in London, to have the sound guy come up and say, I want to sing this song, and we sang Princess Purple Rain. Mm-hmm. And I thought, if you knew the history of that song, how important that is right now. And so,
unfortunately, we can't do that one here either.
No, I understand, but it's
I don't have the copyright license.
No, but people like my folks, of course we kind of bent the rules to take more than there were seatbelts in the car. But there was a good reason. Mm-hmm. There was an honest purpose. And so, I think one has to differentiate between the intent and the heart, right?
Well, and the reason why I wanted to do this was, and I kind of explained to you last week, how from like John Shepherd to Ron Garrison to today, with everything that is happening, not only is the church continuing to give, but now the community has said, we don't want this church to close. And so some people in the community are starting to actually, even though they don't come on a Sunday morning, maybe their kids have come once in a while, I don't know, but for whatever reason, they're starting to give to the church to support it, to go. This church means a lot to the community.
I remember back, again, in the Ron Garrison period, we take certain things now for granted, like fundraisers and fund runs and stuff like that. And if you look at history, in the early 80s, Terry Fox was kind of the first on all of that. And as you might recall, Ron was a runner. And he just kind of it just kind of clicked with him. Well, we could do this fun run. And so he says, well, we'll raise money for the hospital. And he just did it. And he got all the kids in the community. And I mean, it's huge. And you can probably ask the hospital what the final was. But I mean, I knew I got third and I had raised 300. But Mrs. Howe's son, he was working at the gas station at the time. He hit everybody up. I mean, I don't think I want to exaggerate, but I think he raised like $1,000 himself.
Mm.
This was in the early '80s when nobody had heard such a thing. And Reverend Garrison, got instant respect. At that time, the hospital administrator was quite a stern, kind of not a friendly sort of person, but of all people. And it was always a heart for the community that this place was built on.
Yep.
Be it, my parents picking up kids out in Newbury or doing for the hospital. And it was because that's who we were.
Well, and so I want you to think about your first song, because we're gonna play a few songs as we talk too. But when you're talking about Ron and his influence, years later I was at a wedding, and it was Mr. Holmes or Professor Holmes. Can't remember what he taught, but he used to teach at Western. And so I was doing a wedding for his son. And when he found out that I was the pastor of this church, he asked me about Pastor Garrison, because he never came to the church, but they ran together.
Yes.
And they had like this friendship. So Garrison was able to reach out into the community beyond the church walls and influence other people.
You want to know another person? Our wonderful London health guy, Dr. Mackey.
Okay,
He was a runner with Reverend Garrison as well.
nice. I was piecing it together. I kind of remember.
Not many services went by we didn't sing that song.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And, you know, I remember back in the day when, you know, choruses were just starting to change, and, you know, the next step from the hymn book was coming, and Reverend Garrison came back from conference one time with a little tape deck, and prior to the service, he brought Mrs. Howe and myself to the office and said, "We're going to do this song this morning." And I listened to it once, and we made it work. And from then on, we just, whenever there was some good music out there, Reverend Garrison would just say, "Hey, let's try this." And bit by bit, we worked at it. And we had at one point we had a youth leader, Bob Sims. Do you remember him?
Yep.
And he came out and tried to do things. And at one point, when the church was still the other way around.
Well, there's no anniversary service nowadays that doesn't go by where Don McAmile doesn't stand in the middle of the church and bang on this side and say, it's like bangs on this side and say,
Yep.
"This is the wooden side."
Yes.
And then
That's right.
that's going to bed.
Yeah.
That's the cement side. That's the new side. So yeah, the church, the stage was on that side.
Yes, it was. And I remember, I'm going to go back in history a little bit more. One of my first musical things when I was early on was listening to Al and Darlene and Mel and Cam Wilson as they tried to come up with a gospel group, or they would sing these songs, and I would listen to them because my folks would be doing some other important, like some work in the church, and I had nothing better to do than just watch them work on trying to make the music. And I listened to how they harmonized and worked, and I thought, wow, that's something that I understand, and I think I want to get into that. And in musical history, which is the thing that I'm most familiar with in this church, one of the interesting parts is how many good musical groups came through this church. And I was able to see how some of these same musical groups would perform in London at London Gospel Temple, or even at Braeside at these big events. And then I would compare them to the things that they would do in Blanco. And to me, it really gave a benchmark of comparison of what made these people tick. And you could see the people that would give from their heart to a group of 60 people. And you understood that music and people who really make it from the heart are just as caring for a small crowd as they are trying to impress a big crowd. And you learn things in a place like this that last. And the musical lessons that I learned here are things that have done me in good stead for the rest of my life, and the things that I've seen since.
Well, and the musical lessons that you learned, because Marion Howe was here in the beginning, and you could give her almost any song.
Yes.
Like even the newer stuff
Yeah.
that we had, I guess you would say the 90s for me, when I started coming here. You would give her that. She wouldn't even have to have it at home. She'd just show up the Sunday morning, and you play the first few chords, and away she went.
She had such a way of playing where she had it down, and she knew she could play things that she wasn't familiar with, and yet was still effective and useful to her role in trying to be a support musically. And in the complexities of all this high tech and high knowledge of music that I've come across and observed, and you realize, but you don't even have the skills of Mrs. Howe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? If you were actually expected to play something you didn't know, what would you do?
Not even just the skills. Like, so there's this one time. This is going to the Pastor Paul Carroll days.
Yeah.
And he preached a sermon on the rapture. And so at the end of the sermon, when everybody bows their head and closes their eyes, except for Mark, who is peeking all the time. Mm-hmm. But anyways, bows their head, close their eyes, raise your hand if you want to be saved or whatever. and we had that great big huge pulpit, which I believe your grandfather made. And so the huge pulpit was there, and he took his shoes off. So everybody's got, I have my eyes closed. And he tiptoes off the stage, back down the back stairs, but he's got the wireless mic on. So it still sounds like he's on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then Pastor Mike, who was the assistant at the time, he went up into the sound room and blew a trumpet. And then there was nothing. So my eyes are closed at this point. And one by one, I know everybody's head just starts to raise. But where do my eyes immediately go? Marion Howe. I'm like, Marion Howe's still at the piano. I'm okay.
That is the best story I've ever heard. Or one of them. That is amazing.
That was my confirmation that the rapture had not happened.
Oh, you can't make that up. That is amazing. I mean, you know, if you write a book and put pictures, you know, Marion Howe's picture under the word faithfulness, right? Who else's picture would you put that would usurp that, right? I mean, it was like 50 years and she's missed 2 services or something like it's absurd. Or not absurd, it's like just amazing how she was just always there.
Missing a service nowadays is no big deal.
Yeah, well, you know, I got, you know, and it just shows.
We won't go there, right?
Well,
As he looks over at me.
but you know, I look at when you try to say, okay, what's changed in our world and why? One of the things that I look to is the role models that I had.
Yep.
The people that impressed me, the people that I took as personal heroes, right? It was people, you know, when you think of what does dedication, what does, you know, those types of things, you think of Marion Howe. You know, you think of people who stepped out in things they believed in. You think of Reverend Garrison, you know, you think of, I mean, one of his roommates was Paul Kovac, who was from the former Soviet Union. And I mean, there's a man who, when he came and told the stories of what being a Christian was like back then, I mean, that was serious business. I mean, it cost you big time if you were a Christian. I mean, you lived on the edge. If you wanted a Bible, you had to have it smuggled to you.
Mm-hmm. What about great is thy faithfulness? can think of for Mary and Howe, because that's still in my head, is I want to say it was her, that at her funeral, as we were carrying the casket out, we did I'll Fly Away. Only as a symbolic that she has gone up into heaven. It's kind of one of my favorite hymns.
Definitely a time of that time when we were.
Yeah, well, that was a song that we did often.
Often.
What? See, before we split, I just, in the real world, which is a musical trip and journey that is kind of strange to me, that how I found my way there. But part of the music that I was involved in includes basic 3-chord songs. And one of the things that we did during that early time period is all we had was I'll Fly Away, This Is the Day, and a few other 3-chord songs, and we played them every Sunday. And sometimes we would sing them 6 to 10 times. And so...
That actually explains one pastor, I'm not even going to mention his name, but one pastor had come up to me and just out of frustration, he kind of said, they only know so many songs.
But the thing is, I was given the opportunity to make those songs interesting, right? And so when you
and you weren't here at the time when he said that, so there you go.
But part of the skill set that I learned here in Glencoe was, okay, you've got a 3-chord song and you've got to play it again, and 6 to 10 times, and you found a way to not only make it function and work, but make it interesting and make it real. And so, you know, it's helped me to understand the basics of what it means. We used to have Bible school students come, and we often would take them home for lunch. And the coolest thing was if there were Bible school students from Newfoundland, because they were the most interesting people. But when they had a very unique way of dealing with music, because they would sing a song until they meant it, right? They would just sing it till it got in your bones. And that's a fundamental of music that was used in this church. I mean, you sang a song till you meant it, till on Wednesday it would come back to you.
Yep.
Right?
And always did.
It did.
Yeah.
And so now we've got, and this is throughout things, you've got so much content, but none of it means anything to you. Back then we had basic songs, but they meant something to us.
I think that's coming back.
Yeah.
Some of the newer worship songs are actually coming back to almost the idea that I criticize it to a point where they don't know where to end the song sometimes. I heard a song on the radio or on YouTube the other day, a Waymaker version. It went on for half an hour. And I, about 5 minutes into it, and I saw that it was like a half an hour long song. I was like, oh no, I need to fast forward it. Are they actually singing the song for half an hour? And they were. But it's, they sing the words until, again, it has that meaning.
Yes.
And it grabs a hold of you. And I've had people criticize, you're just repeating the words over and over again. But sometimes it takes that before it has that.
You play it and sing it till you mean it.
Yeah.
Right? And we learned that here. And that's not a fad, that's a principle.
Well, it is a fad coming back. Now we're just gonna pause it right there with that rendition of "I'll Fly Away," and yes, that is one of my all-time favorite hymns. And but don't miss out on part two and probably part three as we continue on in the history of the church. We still have like topics like Whithold Krahn to talk about, and the old drop-in center that they had for youth, and our history is so rich. But not only that, we even touch upon the future, the bright future our church has. And so, yes, please don't miss out on parts two and three when they are released. And I'm sure you will enjoy listening to this as much as I enjoyed sitting with Ed and Mark. So, God bless. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and check in on your neighbors and show the love of Christ. God bless.